All right, everybody, we are back. Music in the Northwest. This will be episode number 4. This week, sitting with me is a man whose lasting craft brings energy, power, and depth to music everywhere. Bringing music to its deepest form, fullest form. He's a motorcycle riding, vinyl listening, mastering virtuoso, Dana White.
Hey, thanks, Jordan.
Thanks for coming out.
Yeah, happy to be here and music in the Northwest.
Yeah, man, I'm so glad you get to be here. I don't know if I actually told you this, but I was kind of like nervous to ask if you'd come out and do it. I had to get over my
You're kidding, man.
No,
I'm thrilled to be here.
I'm really glad you came out.
Yeah, who better to talk shop with than Jordan Bolton?
No, I don't know. There's probably other people, but for the sake of today, it'll be fun. How you doing?
Good, great, man. I know you're a Pats fan, and I was thinking about. I know you always ask how you doing, how you feeling.
Yeah.
I'm working the TB12 diet thing, so I'm eating a ton of vegetables lately and getting my health together. And
that's cool.
Not that I've always been healthy, but kicking it up a notch, as Emerald would say.
Yeah. Working on the pliability.
Yeah, I do yoga. Kind of more like a mix of Tai Chi and yoga. It's basic stretching stuff, nothing too intense. My yoga class that I used to go to picked up her stakes and moved out, so I'm doing it solo nowadays. Yeah. But yeah, it's good for the pliability.
Yeah, that's cool. I love that word because nobody thought about that word on a day-to-day basis until the TB12 method came out, and pliability is not a t-shirt word. It is now a t-shirt word. Mm-hmm. That is now on t-shirts everywhere.
As we age, we lose pliability. Yeah. Anyway.
We might have lost followers with the Patriots stuff.
Yeah.
All right, so I want to talk about musical background. Where did music come into your life? Family with music. Where did music come from for you?
My earliest memories of music was at the Hi-Fi. My dad made a deal. He was a sliding glass door man. He sold and installed Arcadia doors, which is like this high-end sliding glass door you would architects would specify on a house. So he was friends with architects, and this one architect in particular, Bill Barton, was an acoustical architect. The Sydney Opera House was a project he was on. Anyway, In the 60s, Bill and my dad made a deal. He traded a sliding glass door for his house for a Macintosh hi-fi system, which is all vacuum tubes, and I mean it's still there today in my parents' house.
Wow.
My mom still listens to it. I'll often send her classical CDs to keep her listening to it.
Yeah.
So my older brothers had record collections. Me playing music, I think I tinkered on the clarinet for a minute. But electric guitar was had the appeal for me, in high school.
Yeah.
Lessons, band ensued. And took it to college, and where I figured out on the recording side of things, one day I remember being in a recording session. I was playing on a track for this other student's senior project, and it was he wanted something Eddie Van Halen, and I'm more Duane Allman wannabe. And I was just really felt like I was fighting this music. And I was like, oh gosh, finally, I'm going to just do what I do. And I at least gave him something. But the whole time, the headphone mix was cutting out every time he would punch me in. I'd lose me, and I'd get the backing track at full blast. So it was really disoriented. And I just sort of knew, I was like, boy, that guy, he could probably play this part better than me. He's such a good musician. And I know how to get a good headphone mix in my sleep. So I just realized in that moment, it was I need to be serving musicians and not be chasing this myself. So in that moment, I knew it was I wanted to be on the engineering side of things.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's cool. That's one thing I love about these podcasts is I get to know people who I'm friends with, but don't get to have these deep how did it all start conversations. That's really cool.
Hi-fi, man.
That's
And growing up in the 70s, FM radio, I mean, like all this stuff we consider classic rock was like in my head, when I was, cruising in the convertible on Cape Cod with my mom, being from Massachusetts and summering down on the Cape, like she was like, sure, turn that up. It's got a good beat, so.
Yeah. That's really cool.
Yeah. And then, to my dad, like, I do mastering and, I got into that because in high school I was helping him on a job and he just happened to be working on a project in a mastering studio, which I knew nothing of. Like, what is that? Mm-hmm. And this would have been in like the mid 80s when CD was really just taking off. So it was like there was computers in there. I saw these Macintosh computers, which I'd never seen before. Mm-hmm. The guy's name was Dr. Toby Mountain. And I always sort of like just kind of stuck that in the back of my mind. It's like, wow, that was cool. Yeah. And so as I got into college and stuff, I ended up looking him up for an internship after college.
That's cool.
And while I had done a lot of like recording studio work and I even did, I worked at an NPR radio station for a while, which was amazing. Like, props to journalists out there. I appreciate what you do. Definitely people like way smarter than I can imagine to be, like in that was the Christian Science Monitor in Boston in those days. But yeah, got into mastering through Toby. He hired me for a while after I interned there too. And at the time they were working on getting the David Bowie catalog to CD for the first time.
Oh, wow.
Also the Frank Zappa catalog. I was actually there when they were just about wrapping that up. So being the intern there, I was shipping FedEx is my job, I was not like EQing the Zappa masters, but it was cool to handle the tapes. And in those days, we weren't putting stuff, it wasn't a CDR or a file or anything. It was a video cassette was the carrier, this PCM system that we used to use. So, and they were fragile and delicate. But yeah, that was really kind of cool to be there. I mean, I thought like, working with big time artists, that's just how it was, right?
Not for me.
It's about the local people. It's about, the up and coming people. That's where I've really found a home in the music industry.
Yeah. Every time somebody comes to me for a session, first of all, I ask them up front, I'm like, are you going to do mastering? And they say, well, we don't know about our budget. And I say, you need to put some budget in there for mastering. I know a guy. Every client I've had, I send to you because I'm like, the work you do is phenomenal.
Thank you.
And and they're all young and up and coming people, and they have an amazing experience, and and it shows in your work how gifted you are at what you do, and your skilled trade and your practice is really cool, and even the relationships are really cool. Even if it's just like a few emails, it's almost like getting to know you. Mm-hmm. It's really cool, and and it comes across in your work, and people that have used you, they know exactly what I'm talking about when I say that. Yeah. That's really cool. Working with the local people is always fun.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jordan. I like that. It's great to work with so many artists. I just cut like invoice number 3040 yesterday.
Wow.
So, I've been doing it since the late 90s, but like 2001 is really where I kicked off full time. Mm-hmm. It occurs to me that there's probably 90% of the people listen to this don't know what mastering is. Mm-hmm. And I'm kind of curious to know from your point of view, like, how would you describe the mastering process? Like, I kind of have my elevator pitch on it, but I'm kind of curious, what is your impression of, like, what is this process? Like, why would somebody do that?
Ooh,
throw it back to you.
Stealing the podcast. I like it. Luckily, that was a question that was going to come up, so that's good. For me, when I talk to people about mastering, it's you take all this work and you spend hours and hours and hours recording your song, and I spend hours and hours editing it, and we spend all this time mixing it and making all of your ideas, their ideas come true, and when I'm talking to them, their dreams and passions, and And when they give it to me, they say, hey, can you level it? Can you slam it through a compressor? And I go, absolutely not. And when I'm having those conversations, I go, well, in the mastering process, it takes, you and I kind of chatted about this, but it kind of brings your music to instead of just being something you listen to, something you experience. And that can happen, just from a mix too. But when something gets mastered, it's not only is it the polish on top, the professionalizing of the song, but it adds depth, it adds character, it brings the best out of the music, because the artist has an idea for the song, the mix engineer has an idea for the mix of the song, the mastering engineers, you're looking at this thing going, I need to make this thing as beautiful and big and powerful as this thing can be. And so when I kind of pitch that, I'm pitching it to like, you want your music to be powerful. It will inevitably get louder because of the process, but you want your music to be powerful. You want it to mean something. And mastering is a big step from having a good mix to being something that people listen to and it's instantly engaging. It becomes captivating beyond just, instead of having to listen for captivation or for inspiration from a song, post mastering, you put on the headphones or you sit down in your car and you turn it on and it's there because the mastering process brings it to the surface. And that's from my experience and how I would, that's how I describe it to people.
That's awesome.
The technical part of it, like for me, I'm like, there's like insanely expensive compressors and EQs and limiters, and Dana sits there and does his thing, and I sit back and I go, and all of a sudden it's like this massive Rubik's Cube that unlocks, and I go, this thing's like 8 dimensions now. I brought it in and it was a wall, and I'm going, we're living in a box inside a box. This thing, describing that part of it, I try to stay away from, because they go, what's a compressor? And I go, okay, I can't. I'm like, I'm not qualified for this.
That's great. I couldn't have said it like that. I mean, one thing you said that I really latched onto was like how it helps the listener like connect to the music more and like get it, where it's like you're not hearing the individual elements sort of poke out at you, but you're sort of able to just reach in and get to the music. And hopefully you feel the music more readily. It's like it just comes to you when the process is done well. And that's why like your original point of like, if I'm just going to slam this through the limiter to get the level so it sounds competitive or something, like you can do that, but there's a lot more behind the magic curtain to do that without ruining the music or without, leaving something on the 20-yard line. I know you like football.
Yeah.
So we get it into the red zone and into the end zone.
Yeah.
And it's, I mean, I don't. It's funny, like working on the music. There's this other brain kind of thing that's happening, so it's hard to rationalize to me. Like at the end of the day, I feel like I've been inside music or something.
Yeah.
And so like the next day when I listen to the record, go through the QC process and whatever, I sort of hear it differently again, which is usually the fun part. It's actually, okay, this is done. It does sound good. Okay, wipe my brow.
Yeah. When I mix, I always do a fresh ear perspective before I do anything. And in my head, like I never even thought about it for mastering. It's like, oh, yeah, it's good. And you send it off, but it's like, no, there's trial and error to mastering too.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, to be honest, yeah, I've got some kind of go-to approaches to do things that generally work, but somebody's going to throw a mix up and I'll go, nope, that's not going to work here. This is not what this needs. Yeah. And you have to find it. It's sort of like feeling your way along the wall in the dark to a point, and it's like things start to work and you can move along and kind of set a template, if you will, and move forward with the record. But the other thing that people may not know is like when you're mixing something, you're thinking about the song and the elements and the guitar level, the voice, how the bass hits. In mastering, I'm thinking like, how does this song come across the airwaves, or how's it going to come across in the car? Like, what's that global perspective that the listener is going to get when they listen through the album? I think it was with Trent you were talking about last week. You guys were talking about listening through a whole album instead of just picking off the hits that you liked and trying to hear what the artist's like sort of long game is with the record. And mastering is a huge part of that, like the pacing of the tunes, like how much time goes between the songs, how they transition. It's just little things that kind of add up to helping the artist communicate that bigger picture. The album.
Yeah. So how would you, from a technical standpoint, describe mastering?
Yeah, I mean, it's really just about making the balance happen to the next level. Like a metaphor I like is the trim work. You've built the house. The musicians and the recording and the mixing have all built this house, and the mastering here is just sort of nailing the trim on the wall to make it that extra pretty. But technically what's happening, dynamics, like how loud stuff is versus how quiet stuff is in the mix. Like there's some reining in of that usually so that you can just sort of set your volume and the music is comfortable. And you can just listen to it across the record without having to jump up and turn things up or down. And then like frequencies, like how much bass, how much mids, how much treble, and those things interact a lot. Like if I try to crank a lot of high end into something, it may get shrill or, so there's ways to like sort of open up the picture, if you will, without, shredding your eardrums in the process, or like on the other end, if somebody wants a lot of bass, sometimes the solution is actually to cut bass frequencies, and that will actually allow the instrument to move better, and you feel it more viscerally. So there's really not a lot of like logic to that. I feel like it's very much trial and error, and do these things with a sense of like knowing what you're looking for.
That's great. So, when I first heard about Specialized Mastering, which is your company, right? Mm-hmm. So, it always said Boston, Portland. Or is it technically Tigard, Portland?
Yeah. The post office says Portland, but my address is technically in Tigard.
Yeah. So, tell me about Boston, because you're talking about, like, that's kind of where you started. Mm-hmm. What was Specialized Mastering like in Boston? I don't know anything about that. So for me, like, what's the story of Specialized Mastering from Boston to Tigard?
Yeah.
What does that look like?
So I also, part of my, like, apprenticeship, if you will, was I had a job in a CD factory in Western Massachusetts. And I was the mastering guy there, and I kind of oversaw like all the input media coming in, like what the music industry was sending us to get put onto CD. Not everybody used mastering engineers, so I get weird DAT tapes or CDs with problems and stuff. So I was fielding a lot of that. Also built a cassette duplication factory. We had these killer lyric machines and a digital bin. It was really a great cassette, and I managed to get the purchasing agents to use this really expensive German tape from BASF. It was like, the cassette was like, we weren't making any money, but they were great. Anyway, so that was kind of winding down for me. There was some stuff going on there. The company was sort of moving into more like they wanted to work for software companies and things. So I was like, I want to get back in the studio. And I had an opportunity to move to a company called Nine West Mastering, which was owned by Hank Koistra. And he was really successful, like just doing indie bands. And he had a great studio in his garage. And I worked there for like a year with him, because he was transitioning to move to Florida. So it was like, we were doing this great schedule where it was like, he was on 10 days and then I had the rest of the month. And we were busy enough that like, we were constantly working. Yeah. We were having, punk projects were coming in like crazy. We had label arrangements and stuff. So it was very busy. And So that really got me a lot of like in the seat experience,
Yeah.
Like trial by fire. And then, Hank, he moved to Florida and actually just got out of the business. He got interested in buying and selling Apple stock and made a fortune that way. But so that left me with nothing. And so I took over the room and I put in, I basically rebuilt the room with fresh gear and carried on like that till, I met a girl and moved to Portland. It was like 2005, and I was flying back and forth quite a bit to service clients in the Boston area, and trying to get the train rolling in Portland as well.
Yeah,
which is still like ongoing. I feel like I'm meeting new people all the time here, and it's just been great. I really love the music scene in Portland, like the kind of people here, the whatever's in the water, in the air that these people are drinking and breathing is like bringing out something that I just love. Like the projects I work on, it's like pinch me. I'm just so excited to be part of these things. Like there's so much music I just resonate with. I was just thinking about that this morning. Like, boy, I really seldom like get a clunker project to work on anymore.
Yeah.
Which, if you'll indulge me, I have a sort of a story about that. And like the places are interesting, but like the moment I knew I was a mastering engineer, like in my own heart and mind, was like I was sitting. This was back in Boston in the early days, and I had a project that I thought was, boy, this thing is all over the place. Like musically, the engineering was really rough. And I was like breaking out the big guns, I'm going to put a multi-band compressor on this. I'm going to, really EQ it hard and really get this thing straightened out. And I was sitting down eating lunch, and it just wasn't happening. I was like, I was not feeling this. And it's like, so I popped on an album. I don't remember what it was, but it was mastered by one of the greats like Bob Ludwig or Bernie Grundman. And I was just listening to it, and it occurred to me as like, I don't think that record was recorded or mixed all that well, but it sure sounds good. Like the end result was great. And I started thinking about it. I was like, well, what would Bernie Grundman do with this project? I thought, wow, he would probably respect the music a little more and not try to strong arm it. Maybe get a little bit of empathy about, hey, where is this music coming from? Like, not try to like make it in his vision of how it should be, but what is it about this song? What is it about this record? And start drawing that out in the mastering process and respecting what's there. Tuck it in around the edges a little bit, but it was like a little more of a hands-off thing really made that record sing. And I knew at the end of the day, I was like, this empathy, like really finding out what that song is about and making that what's important and not the mastering process.
Yeah.
And just that kind of mindset shift is like really kind of set me on my way. I don't know if it matters to anybody else, but to me, like in my heart, like I knew that's when I'm kind of sort of arrived and I'm comfortable with what I'm doing. It's like, it's the empathy, the music matters, the person matters. Like this person's creativity, no matter where they are. I mean, if they recorded with you or if they did it in their bedroom, whatever, they deserve a good sounding record at the end of the day. And if I can help that, I'm in.
Yeah. No, that's cool. I'm glad you shared that. That's awesome. When you get a mix, somebody sends you their WAV file or whatever files they would send you, probably WAV files.
Nowadays, yeah.
You pull it up and you listen to it. What are you listening for? Before you do any mastering, but you just pull it up to, I think you've told me you kind of preview them a little bit beforehand. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What's the preview?
Well, I want to make sure that what you're bringing is like you're going to get the most out of the mastering process. Like if there's something I can catch before we commit to the project, that it's like, hey, I got your back here. I just want to make sure that the T's are crossed, the I's are dotted, and a lot of times it's like I will just listen to like basic technical stuff. Like, did you cut the beginning of the track off? Is the ending chopped? Are the right number of bits there? You'd be surprised. Like the computers will do some stuff behind your back that you may not catch. So I've got a bit meter. I'm always checking that stuff. And just looking for anything fishy. Really strange, out of balance things. And that's like the preview, like just, and then I also want to get a sense of the music, like what's going on here. Maybe try to start to figure out like, what is the goal of this music? Like, where is it going to go? Mm-hmm. And I try to also enjoy it too. Like a lot of times, like I like to just listen to the mix and like take that for what it is and enjoy it at that level too. Mm-hmm. So a lot of it is just sort of like connecting with the music. And again, just looking out for anything strange. It's the, I got your back, that's, when you just, how many times have you been in a mixing session and it gets to be the wee hours and you kind of lost sight of what's happening and you just really need a fresh ear.
Yeah.
By the time you're done 10 tunes and you've given it everything you've had, it's nice to just sort of pass it off to somebody who's got a fresh ear and
absolutely
and can kind of hear it fresh again.
Yeah. And especially since, as the mastering engineer, you're typically not a part of anything before it hits your desk. And so that is the definition of clean ears. It's somebody who's, who knows, you might have been working on a funk, jazz, soul record, and then this, hair metal band sends you their stuff, and you go, like, that's the definition of fresh ears for what's happening. And and that's, I don't know, such a cool perspective to have. And being a guy who does a lot of mixing and tracking, I very rarely get to have that experience where someone goes, hey, listen to this. We just finished this. And I listen to it and go, oh, that's nice. Like just, the third wave of ears, just I've never heard anything, never heard it and don't know anything about it. Just get to sit back and enjoy it.
Yeah.
It's something that's really cool.
Yeah, there's like the layman's ear is sort of valuable, You've worked hard on stuff and you think it's banging, but, you play it in the car for somebody. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, and maybe we got more work to do. So, sometimes I can be the resource for that.
Yeah. I like to run my mixes past like my wife.
Yes.
I'll be like, hey, that is a sound. She'll go, oh, what's that? And I'm like, uh-oh. That's like, I haven't pushed play yet. That's not good.
Yeah. I mean, there's value in that. You don't want to obviously depend on that too much,
yeah.
But they can catch things like, cause they listen to music as a pure fan and not, they're not thinking this, you had to run a marathon to make that mix happen. Mm-hmm. It's likely, there's maybe a loose end or two here and there. If you can get that perspective, maybe a unpartial ear to catch something goofy, why not?
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, hey, does this sound good? She's like, what's that? There's like a weird noise. I like listen and I'm like, oh yeah, that's a hum track that I didn't do anything to. Oh, I forgot. I need to go do that. Yeah. Or like a snare issue, like she's, she's a musician, but doesn't do any mixing or anything like that. She goes, the snare sounds really loud. The drums sound loud. I go, oh. Like somebody who doesn't do any mixing or whatever just goes, I know real quick. All right, Jordan, you overdid it. You overdid it.
Yeah, or, maybe not, but,
yeah,
this is rock and roll. Well, what are you talking about? The drums should conk you over the head.
I do like my drum. I like drums. I love drum tones.
I like the way you mix drums, Jordan.
Thank you.
It's always like, poof in the gut and they're cracking and it's like they've got weight to them, in the way you mix them. It's always makes my job just easy. Oh, I don't have to try to manufacture that. It's really hard to like manufacture like this gravity in mastering. If it's not there in the mix, it's kind of hard to pull it out of thin air.
Yeah. I appreciate it. Thank you for that. Do you have any pet peeves? Whether it's stuff you get sent, like musical pet peeves. I should say like musical. Like I'm sure there's other things in life, but like,
oh man, I don't know. Pet peeves? I try to be pretty positive. Music is like medicine to me.
Yeah.
It's like my mental health and my connection to the spiritual world.
Yeah.
The axe I had to grind was like a long time ago in top 40 radio. Like when I was a kid, it was like they would play the same 10 songs over every hour over and over again. And it's like, if you didn't like the song, it was kind of torture.
Yeah.
The idea was they play it over and over. So like, no matter if it was good or bad, you liked it or didn't. Eventually you got so used to it, it was just became ingrained in your head. I didn't like that, but that's not an issue nowadays. I mean, who listens to the radio for like fresh music anymore?
Yeah.
But the industry stuff, like the showbiz kind of like side of the music, like I don't really relate to that. So that's why I really have stuck it out in smaller markets and have not gone to LA to, try to work with the pop stars and all that. I like more of the homegrown music. And like I work with a lot of jazz people, and the singer-songwriters, the rock bands and stuff. That's kind of like my preference. So I'm happy to like kind of be of service there.
Yeah, that's awesome. Last time I was over at your place for mastering a tune. Was it a tune or an EP? I think it was an EP. We were just chatting about bass players, and John Mayer came up and Pino Palladino. We were talking a little bit about that. And I played one of his tunes, and it was one of his newer songs. And the way it was mastered, it almost seemed like it made like the hair stand up on your neck because it just squashed so hard. And I had never heard it that way before because the listening situation was so different than, plugging it in your car. Because if I'm casually listening, I'm not listening for that kind of stuff. But this song, like listening and sitting there, I just felt every beat just squish. And you're like, ooh, that could be kind of tiring to listen to. I guess I just like that fascinated me, the way you recognize that and very quickly. And it was intriguing to me. And I was like, that's so interesting. I don't even know if it's a conversation point. Might not even make it on the podcast. But for me, I was just so like captivated by that moment where you're like, oh, I feel like there's so much music in there that we're missing because we're here feeling it get slammed over and over again. I don't know.
Yeah, there was this other thing happening that wasn't like in rhythm with the music, and it wasn't. It was there for another reason. It was the loudness thing. It was this way to get the track to be, popping out when it hits a playlist. The louder is better on this planet. People respond. It gets your attention.
Yeah.
There's ways to do it, and there's ways to kind of be innocuous about it. Mm-hmm. But when you're really pushing, like, and at that level, there's a lot of pressure to kind of do that stuff. And when you're going for that last inch of loudness, there's sacrifices. This distortion that I was hearing, and it was clipping, so it was like this instantaneous like bit of distortion would come and go, and it was, and it was stifling the way that the track felt. Like I was kind of hungering just to hear what did the mix sound like before the mastering got too cooked. It's like overcooked is basically what I was reacting to, and it bugs me personally and probably a handful of other people, but there's a lot of people who love it too, can hear through that and appreciate it because it comes through well on a cell phone speaker or a computer speaker, something small. It has presence and staying power. But, I think I'm kind of reaching for more like musicality in general and like letting things move. I would put it in the ballpark loudness wise, but I don't necessarily want to like just stun you with this like wince-inducing, intensity on a track.
Yeah.
There's more to music than triple forte.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, the beauty of music's in the silence. And hearing it from your perspective on the mastering level, where it's like not necessarily quiet, but it's like letting the music be the impact instead of having like the level be the impact. I was trying to figure out how to word that really well. And
well put.
Thank you. I was like, all of a sudden my mouth got ahead of my brain. I'm like, I need this to stick.
Well, to your point, when somebody like a great orator wants to get your attention, they'll whisper and draw you in. And, when there's a pause in the music, all of a sudden everybody stops and it draws you back in. And it's a hugely effective way to help engage the listener. I mean, anything you can do to like bring the listener in and like hold their attention. Music's got to have those mechanisms. And in an album, one of the things I've been doing more lately is leaving more space between tunes. In the punk stuff, it's like a half a second go. The pacing is frenetic, but most music, it's like, palate cleanse. Give me that few seconds of downtime. And then when the next piece comes in, it's just got way more presence and gravity. You don't feel like you've been listening to the same song for 40 minutes. It's got that pacing, some breathing room, and it's project dependent. Sometimes I string the songs together so there's no space between, it's dangerous, but the Cars' first album is like that. It's really works. I mean, because there's this great contrast. But for most stuff, you really want to have a few beats in there to sort of come down and reset your emotions.
When I kind of picked up on listening to music for myself, it was like iTunes where like I would click the song I wanted. So like the gap between never mattered. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until I came to one of your sessions and sat down and you're like, I think you asked me, you're like, how long do you want the break to be between the songs? And I went, I have no idea.
I
don't even know what that means.
Doesn't the computer do that?
But that was a cool journey to get to navigate. That was something I learned that was, I'd never thought about it. Didn't even process it. But now that I'm listening in more album format, and focusing on that, listening to albums front to back, and it's so important. It is so important to be able to, like the listener, it's almost like either your heart rate comes back up to like a normal beat or it comes down to a normal BPM and just like comes to a good spot. And you're right. It's that emotional, like, oh, that was a journey. All right, here we go. And you're back into the next one. And then, but like you're saying, like for those upbeat tunes, it's like you're just hitting it.
The process is fun too. Like it's a great way, like in a mastering session, to engage the musicians or the artist, to like get them involved, because a lot of the mastering is like, well, it's a half a dB here. It's sort of like I don't really hear that until it's all put together, like these really small moves. Mm-hmm. A few things here and there adds up to this change in the sound. But the pacing of the album, that's something that I think I will call the musicians in. If there's a drummer in the room, like they just know where to put it, and that's really helpful to me. And I'll do it, but I like to get the musicians' input. We have a little discussion about how do you approach the spacing, and starting to think about the big arc, the overall pace of the record, and I do it like several different approaches. The one I really like is to just play the outro of the song, or like halfway through the last chorus, and let the outro play and just sort of like space out and pick a spot. And usually that's where it like instinctively feels good to just about everybody. Yeah. Or we count time on the end of a track. You keep the pulse going, and drop it on a downbeat, or on a, put it on a 2, so you kind of get this, you catch the listener off a little bit.
Yeah.
But if you're looking to maintain pacing and you drop it on a downbeat, you sort of like imagine the song was continuing another like bar and a half, and you drop it on a downbeat. You maintain that pace of the previous tune, even though the next tempo may be different. So, it's just different ways to think about it. But yeah, it's just a great way to kind of re-engage the artist, who's been reading a magazine for the last 2 hours.
Yeah. It's a fun process, because you and I will sit there and it's almost like you're like jamming out to the end of the tune. And I'm usually like representing artists, or at least maybe it's more selfish for me. I just want to come hang out with you, but I'll come over and hang out. And like, we'll set these times and you and I are just sitting there like head bobbing, and then we'll pick a spot and be like, nah, that's not it. And we'll go back and let's do it again and go, that could be it. Just for fun. Let's go back and do it one more time and wait a little longer. And we find, you find that sweet spot where it just kind of sits, and it's really nice.
Let me just try this one thing.
Yeah, I think this will work.
It's like, eat. No, go back. Yeah. What we had was better before.
Yeah, it's like,
it's trial and error for sure. You also, that's a mysterious thing. It's like that time. I'm certainly no rhythm guru. Like I should probably like study that, drums or something, to get like a deeper understanding of like how rhythm affects people like in a more visceral way. But intuitively, and just my musical training usually gets us there in a pretty good spot. Yeah. But rhythm matters. I mean, that timing. If you're listening to albums, like you said, on if it's a single or if it's showing up in your iTunes playlist, and there's like a default couple of seconds, it's. But in the scope of a larger work, an album. Yeah. I recently did an album that was 4 CDs long.
Oh.
Yeah, it's avant-garde, classical, noises and prepared piano and all this really interesting musical content, and abstract for sure. And the pacing on that was really challenging because so much of it was noisy. We ended up just really stretching out the spaces. Like 6 seconds was my starting point. And then they were like, we need more. It's still, harsh. So we need like a palate cleanser here. Mm-hmm. Let's go to 8. And I think we ended up at like 9 to 10 seconds roughly. I was feeling it out musically, but that's about how wide they were. And some of these pieces are fairly short. So a lot of those CDs are silence to just, give the listener that recovery time from sort of a visceral assault.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's great stuff. But, these things kind of make you rethink, there's no right way to do this.
Yeah. No. Yeah. And there's really not. And it's all about the art and the emotion and the feeling, and it all comes back to the people.
Yeah. Representing what was this artist trying to conjure when they created this music? Like what is that picture in their mind? What are they saying? What is this story? What is the message? I want to take the layers off that's between the musician and the recording. Pull those layers down and let that just come through to the listener. And there's something to be said that the mastering process can help or hinder that.
Yeah. And I will be an advocate that says you help that a lot.
Thank you.
All right. We kind of chatted about this when you were looking over the questions, but you're one of the only mastering engineers I know. But who are your influences? Like, who are people that you look at, and then what was influencing about it? Because this is such a... Mix engineers go, I like the way they mix their drums. I like the way they mix their this or that. And bands, I like the way this guitar player plays guitar. But like, who's your mastering hero, and what do they do that you look up to?
Mm-hmm. Top of my list is a guy named Bernie Grundman, who I mentioned previously. He's been in LA, Hollywood, I think, forever. And one of the original people to do mastering as a independent process, like an independent process, aside from just having the record label do it in-house. And he came to do that because he had a vision to do it better. A lot of it is just quality based, the equipment that he used, built all in-house. I mean, spared no expense, still to this day invests a huge amount of money in a tech staff that's looking out for everything. Every last piece of strand of wire is gone over with a fine-tooth comb. And I mean, that's a luxury one can have when you master for, stuff that's routinely on the top 10. Mm-hmm. but he got there early and was just frankly doing a great job. It really clicked for me, like for him, like appreciating his work. I was listening to an album and I thought, oh, I like the way this came out. And I put on a record, I think it was Robin Trower, and it was maybe done in 1979 or 80 or something. And I instantly recognized that it was Grundmann's mastering on there. Like I could just hear the way the picture was presented, the size of the image, the way he sort of left space for the music to come through, and how it was around the edges. And it was really interesting to me that I could notice his sound, but it wasn't the sound of him. It was sort of like he was invisible and the music came through in a certain way. And it's like this transparency that was really appealing to me, but it also rocked it. Like it had guts and it had presence. It wasn't just like he did nothing. It was, he helped bring this record to life. And he did that in a way that was unobtrusive to the music. And he's been doing it for a long time and consistently solid, so I am inspired by that. And that's what I seek to do. I mean, sometimes you need to like juice it up and, I don't know, glue it together or whatever. But then there are times where it's really nice to just sort of like be a light touch on this and just let your mix come through. Yeah. And knowing when to do that is the hard part, because you get into habits with things, or you think you know something, but a new piece of music comes across your desk and it's like, boy, I don't know. Let me rethink that. I worked on a project with John Durant recently, and they had done a lot in the mix to kind of preempt mastering. And really, at the end of the day, it was like a very small move of EQ and bringing the level up, and that was it. And it just sounded just right, So they had, they brought it a long way. And then, there are other times where I really need to just push the level and compress it hard or whatever. Mm-hmm. But Bernie seems to have a way of doing that, in a just satisfying way, just musically. Yeah. He can get the level without creating too much ear fatigue. I think when I was experiencing like what would Bernie do on this mix, mm-hmm. I was thinking about that. It's like, I just want this music to come through and not have this be about me. And it's like the artist name is on the front. My name is in small font on the back if I'm lucky. Mm-hmm. I need to support this artist's vision. I need to help them get heard. I need to be an advocate for their career, because that's what I'm here for. I want the artist to get the benefit of what we do. Yeah. It's, for me, I'm just happy to be along for the ride.
Yeah. All right. We talked music, talked a little bit of life. You are a BMW rider avidly. What do you ride currently? I gave it away as a BMW, but what do you ride motorcycle-wise? Mm-hmm. What are you riding?
I looked at your question earlier, and it was something about why do you ride a cruiser and how come you're not into a speed bike? And I encourage you to look out the window and see what I wrote up on. It's a BMW K series, which is a inline four. BMWs have classically had the Boxer engine, which sort of looks like a couple of beehives sticking out the side of the engine. But I have an inline four, which is it's a kind of it gives you a different power delivery, if you will. Okay. But it's a pretty mighty machine. It'll go.
Yeah.
But I don't want to attract any unnecessary attention from law enforcement, so to speak. So,
but you're still
I'm interested in safety too. I mean, I teach the Team Oregon motorcycle class to beginners on weekends, and when you're dialing in your technique, you can ride at a good clip without being ragged, or you can manage the risk a lot better, by just controlling your speed a little bit more. It's like music, you can be loud, but if somebody wants to hear a little more nuance in their playing, as opposed to just sheer speed. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of parallels there.
Yeah. Do you have a longest trip that you've been on? What's the longest bike trip you've been on?
I think we went 13 days, 12 or 13 days.
Wow.
It was a trip out to Wyoming for a rally, and then we went through like the Black Hills of South Dakota and into Montana. We rode the Going to the Sun Highway through Glacier National Park, which is this ridiculous road. It's cantilevered out on the edge of a mountain. You look down and there's nothing there for 1,000 feet. Amazing place. And then we went back up the Rockies to Banff and up the Icefields Parkway to Jasper. Wow. I don't know if you know the Icefields Parkway, but it's glaciers, and it's a series of mountains along in the Canadian Rockies that are just spectacular. Yeah. Jaw-dropping beauty out there, and there's still ice. You can take a bus tour out on the Athabasca Glacier. Oh. It's shrinking though. If anybody's interested in environmental science, go there and have a look. They've measured the ice receding over the years. Like, here's where it was in 1902. Here it was in 5, and into the 1980s, you can see the ice moving back at an exponential rate, which is interesting. Anyway, and when we came to Jasper and then back through, Washington State, that was a lot of fun. I did that with some older guys. One of my best motorcycling buddies, who's no longer with us. One of the real first friends I got when I moved to Oregon. So, Gary, we miss you. But I'm planning on going out to Montana this summer. In fact, I was just putting a calendar invite on for late June this year, going back to Montana. I think probably go over Idaho and the Panhandle up there.
Cool.
Yeah. Definitely looking forward to that.
Yeah. All right. If you could build a dream trip, so any road you've ever traveled to any destination, it could just be one that you've gone on, but for whether it be for the excitement of the drive or when you were at whatever event, if it was just maybe as a perfect sunrise or something, but what ride would that be?
Wow. Well, I've taken a lot of rides. I've got something like 140 or 50,000 miles on motorcycles in the last, since I moved here. I used to commute on the motorcycle when I lived in Massachusetts, but Oregon is for riders, man. I mean, there's some roads out here. California. Some of my favorite riding is in Northern California. There's just so many great roads in like the Trinity area, the Pacific Coast Highway, PCH Highway 1. South of Monterey, that stretch of Highway 1 is just, twisty roads and like eye-popping scenery. I mean, it's like hard to keep on the road and look at the scenery. It's really nice. Wow. I've done that a few times, and it's always killer. And then we did that trip once. My buddy Joe and we did it together, and then we came back through the Sierra Nevada, and that was really epic. The one thing I want to do, though, as I've never been to Europe, and, so my ancestry is like Irish, German, English, and so I'd love to do a motorcycle tour of, maybe do the Ireland, loop. And I would love to get into Germany and like Switzerland, northern Italy, and do the Alps down there on a motorcycle.
That'd be fun.
I'm looking forward to that. That's definitely the like high on the bucket list thing. I would love to just see where my ancestry comes from. You can in Ireland, you can just go to find where your clan is. The church still has records. And
Wow.
Here's where your people are. So I've got to do that.
Yeah, that'd be super fun. So riding a motorcycle is a commuting tool, right? So it takes you somewhere. But where does riding take you, not physically? Like when you get on the bike, where do you go? Like,
great question. People like ride motorcycles to like be forced to be in the moment, in the now, you know. And yeah, when you're doing a little bit of performance riding on that PCH, I mean, like you have to pay attention. All your mental resources are like focusing on the road ahead. You know what's coming up. So it kind of shuts off that part of your brain where you're worried about something, or you're planning ahead, or you're remembering something. Like when you're doing a little bit of performance writing, it sort of puts you on the edge. It's a lot like playing music that way. It's like you've got to deliver this music now. But not always. I mean, sometimes it's like, you know, what am I going to get for lunch? You know, it's like there's time to just mull stuff over. And I purposely don't have music in my helmet when I ride. I don't have communication system, none of that. Just so that I can get that, the mental break. You know?
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, if you're traveling long distance on an open road, you kind of like, you face yourself and how silly we really are, you know. It's like, okay, time to move that thought off the table here and think something cool.
Yeah.
You know, I remember that my wife and I did a trip to southern Utah, and we did all the national parks through there, like Arches and Canyonlands and Zion and Bryce Canyon. We went out to Mesa Verde on that trip. So a incredible trip. And I just remember like long stretches of road, like just getting there. I was like, boy, what do I want to think about now? You know, like my brain is like freewheeling here. So yeah, motorcycle, it can be kind of therapeutic in that way.
Have you ever had an experience, kind of shifting back towards music, where a project you were working on, it could be a song or an album, as you were mastering, you just kind of had to almost take a step back and just, like it struck you emotionally harder than I'm doing this as my job, but like it just kind of took you back somewhere or brought up some emotions. Just, it could be a song or an album, or maybe it's even a client you worked with where you went, oh, it just kind of like took you back for a second.
Boy, that happens a lot. You know, it's a fine line. Like to get emotionally invested in a project can kind of mute some of your better judgment. So it's, you know, but yeah, I mean, a lot of music, like Kingsley Durant's record that just came out, I've been listening to that a lot. And I remember mastering that, and we had just so much fun. Kingsley and his brother, the producer, John, was like very music that I just really vibed with, you know, guitar-based stuff. And there's just some phrases on that record that just really like brought me in there. And not on like a I want to cry level, or like it reminds me of somebody, like it was more like, boy, that just feels good in my bones.
Yeah.
You know, like that kind of response. But yeah, the job though requires like perspective. You know, it's like I'll feel something like all the time. But at the same time, I need to be able to shift out of that and make sure that the fade is correct, and make sure that the CD text is right. You know, the day-to-day stuff is taken care of properly.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to just sort of get sucked into loving this music and, you know, wanting to take it somewhere. You know, it requires like this shift in perspective. I got to listen for these things. I've got to enjoy the music. I've got to go back into like analytical mode, shift to, the analytical against the subjective, all those things like really have to be able to bounce back quickly.
Yeah, it's like a big balancing act kind of thing where you have to,
Yeah, knowing what mental resources you need at the moment, which, that takes a lot of experience. I mean, there's some engineers who just think about this stuff as ones and zeros and ship it. And there are other people who are just super passionate about it, and they have somebody else deal with the technical side of it. So
yeah. Who would you consider to be your most recognizable public client, if I'm allowed to ask?
I've done stuff for a lot of like fairly well-known like household names over the years. Like I did a Jimmy Eat World EP a while back. The biggest selling record I ever did was called Goddess Chant, was for Shauna Carroll, who actually just died recently. And she's like a spiritual teacher. And that was that was like one of the first mastering projects I ever did.
Wow.
Yeah. Tens of thousands of copies of that sold. More recently, probably the biggest name would be Nako, Medicine for the People. Is an album called My Name is Bear. And Nako is touring, like he plays Red Rocks every summer.
Wow.
Max Ribner's in his band. This is really like super positive stuff. So it was really fun to work with them on that.
Yeah.
Label project. And then locally, people like David Friesen, I've done probably 15 albums with him.
Wow.
And he's like a jazz legend. I love the stories that he tells, how, he played with somebody in the 1960s, Memphis Slim, or, he played with all kinds of jazz legends in those days. He's at that level. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I tend to forget these things because, I'm really focused on the project that I'm working on now. And I care about, the project that you're bringing in as much, if not more than those. I mean, it's like everybody's record matters to me. And that's important. Like philosophically, like I'm not chasing like some big project, get my name, you know what I mean? It's like, I'm trying to make it not about me. It's trying to be of service to the community.
Yeah. What's the hardest mastering session you've had? Whether it be for probably not technical reasons, because we all have those days where just something like a tube blows or something happens. Not necessarily that, but like whether it was difficult because of maybe something going on in your personal life that made work hard, or it was something going on with the client, or the tune was just something that they said, no, this is exactly how I want it, but musically it made no sense.
Fortunately, that's really rare. There's been times like, if like I do remember working on a project when my father was dying, and that was really hard to focus. Like, I had to like get help, like I had the producer like finish it off for me. But fortunately that doesn't happen every day. But, there have been times, like I've worked with clients who bring a lot of like, baggage, or let's say, that's happened. Fortunately, not often. I mean, I work with some great, nice people. And there's, who knows, like it's not easy, and you're trying to, work with the music. You're also trying to make sure the person is happy. And, experience helps kind of head that off a little bit too. Sometimes you just have to stand your ground. Like I remember early on, I can't think of a specific person, but I sort of felt pushed around. And when I stood up and said, no, like, I'm not going for that, and, spoke plainly to their face, they're like, okay, they were testing me, kind of more that kind of, weird interpersonal stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah, more of a concept of like just being a professional, treating people with respect. Usually that works.
Yeah.
And, we get through whatever it is.
Yeah.
And, sometimes those are the best sounding projects. Like somebody kind of takes you off your game a little bit and you're sort of left to your, you run on impulse power to get through it. And I've looked back on some of those sessions and go, that actually is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Their vision comes through.
Yeah. All right. I have a couple rapid fire questions, quick answers. You got a chance to look at them, but the first thing that kind of pops off your head for these guys. So I want to know, what is your go-to rainy day album or song?
Rainy Day. It's funny. My first thought was like my heart song album,
Mm-hmm.
I've got to say Asia from Steely Dan. Like, it just can do no wrong. I mean, just,
Yeah.
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 On vinyl, preferably, actually.
Yeah. Because you can wire your mastering system to play vinyl, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the turntable's, wired right into the console. So
Yeah.
just pull it up.
Oof.
Which is nice, because then I can, if somebody's looking for a vinyl vibe, I can actually play a record and compare the sound of what I'm doing to a record.
That's really awesome.
Or a radio broadcast, for that matter. I've got the FM tuner wired in.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's all, I've got the A/B process is really nice for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, Steely Dan Asia, I mean, that album was in my house. Like, it came to my house when it came out. My older brother Craig bought it, and we wore it out. I mean, it got played constantly. And the other thing that's really great about that album, I don't know if you know it, but the liner notes are really, like, just really fascinating. The half of the liner notes are written from this jilted magazine writer, like I forget what magazine it is, but he thought that he was welcome to come into the sessions, but he was sort of being scorned by the band as he was there trying to write a piece on this recording.
Yeah.
And then the label executive sort of has to save it. Clive Davis, I think. And he writes this glowing review of the record, like on the second half of the liner notes. I always just thought that was really funny that they put all that in.
Put it in there. Just threw it in there.
But it's, musical masterpiece.
Yeah.
Recording technology, music arrangements, like songs, performances, like the musicians they had on there are just, at the time, like all their favorite soloists who were alive at the time that they could get. So it's really, I don't know, Mount Everest of music to me.
Yeah. That's awesome. All right. Do you have a go-to Christmas artist or album?
Gosh, I wish I could be at my mom's house to pull out that one she bought at the department store in 19 whatever. When I was really a little kid, there was this one I grew up with, but it's a compilation thing, and I know it has like Bing Crosby on there. I'm sure there's Elvis Presley, Nat King Cole is on it. It's like all these classic things. That's the Christmas album I like.
Oh yeah.
Whatever it is, I'll have to tell you some other day.
Yeah. I will be waiting for that.
I'll ask my mom.
Yeah. Do you have a dream piece of gear? Money's no object. You could just go and just like walk in and be like, thanks, this is mine. Here's your envelope of money. Whatever.
I have some really nice gear that I really liked. I've settled in on a rig. I've actually added some stuff lately, but if I could go in the night and go and like take everything out of Bernie's room, like all that custom gear he made, like I'd do that, or just work there if I could.
Yeah.
All that custom stuff. I mean, really, like the mastering chain is such a synergistic thing. Any one piece of gear doesn't quite get you there. It's sort of like how they all interact and electronically relate.
Yeah.
And I have kind of a recipe of how I do it. I like passive EQs and a parametric EQ. I like a fast compressor to kind of catch the peaks, and then something that's kind of more gluey and slow. That generally works for me on just about everything.
Yeah.
So, you know, as long as I have that kind of stuff, I can usually get what I need.
Yeah.
But commercial stuff, I mean, there's so much great stuff. I use a lot of Prism gear, SPL stuff, Manley stuff.
Yeah.
You know, it's all generally solid.
I'm a fan of Manley stuff, but in the small market engineering world, Manley's like top shelf for stuff for like that I would ever use in a studio. Like if I can plug into an ELOP or something, I'm having a good day.
You like that? Yeah.
I do. I'm a sucker for it.
Yeah, I have a Very-Mu, the mastering version. So the other thing about this gear is like it's got to be resettable. So if we do a mastering session and they say, "Oh, can you run the instrumental mixes too?" Like at another day, I can just recall my settings easily and just go. So there's not a lot of expense to like recalling a mix out of my memory. You know, like that would be hard.
Yeah.
So yeah, everything's got switches on it, which is generally a little different from what you have in a regular recording setup.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be. I don't need to recall my compressor. I just needed to make sure. I need to make sure it hits I need that in between spot where a switch wouldn't be able to hit. I guarantee 99% of the time that's exactly where it needs to be. Is where I couldn't get to it.
There's a thing that happens though when you have switches instead of a pot where you're sort of like, you know, splitting hairs. It becomes a decision. Do I like a half a dB or a dB, or do I like this frequency or that frequency? You know, and you just bounce back and forth and you pick one. So it's sort of like a different aesthetic or different approach.
My brain just totally just like exploded with like I need to do that. My brain just went I need to learn that learning curve. That sounds amazing.
It's liberating because you're not you don't stress over it. It's like, does this sound better or does that? Moving on.
It's not, how does this feel? It could feel good now. Does it feel good later? And it's like, nope, this or that.
There is it's tempting to sort of like do that with your brain to like buy into the black magic of like, oh, you know, it's like sitting just right. And yeah, you want to kind of go there, but you also, the decision is liberating, you know. It's hard to be in the middle of a decision, you know, like in between here and there. It's like unsettling, but when you make a choice, you
make your choice.
You made the choice, and you're confident with it.
Because like right behind us, we have some API. Those are the A's, so the 550As, and you know, I mean they're not surgical whatsoever. They're slabs of dB. Adjustments, but they always bugged me because I couldn't finesse. And so for me, I always was like, I don't use them as much as I should, because I hear stuff. I'm like, oh, that sounds so good. If I would have, could have, but that's something I don't know. Having hearing you talking about just that decision-making mentality, I don't know. I'm having revelations in the midst of a podcast. I like it.
Yeah. Cool.
I love it.
Yeah. I know the API stuff is like 2 dB, 4 dB, 8 was really coarse for mastering.
Yeah.
You know, I'm like half a dB, which, you know, a scientist would tell you that's basically inaudible to most people, but I don't know. You hear it. And then like my SPL EQ has like tenths of a dB settings.
Wow.
Yeah, and the real like is you can just barely knock it off of center and but you hear it. I mean, it seems to make a difference. At least I think so. I don't know.
Whatever you're doing when I'm sitting
the phone keeps ringing, so I'm gonna go with it matters. Small amounts of difference is important.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it matters. All right, I only got a couple more questions because I know you're a busy guy. Phone keeps ringing. We got stuff to do. What's next? What are some goals you have that it can be music related or just life related? Just as we've gone on this big journey together, what's next for you?
You know, one of the things I would be remiss to not mention is like a lot of like what I do and how my life has unfolded is a lot of things have just sort of shown up. Opportunities, like the fact that my older brother had this like toy guitar, like I saw that, the fact that that stereo existed in our house. The people that I met that helped me move here to get here, the people who taught me about motorcycling, like all of this stuff is, by being out there and doing life, like getting into things and making connections, and things show up like, and you just sort of pull on that thread, you know what I mean? You pull the thread and you start following it. And, that's worked for me. I try to, keep a light hand on the reins and not be obsessive goal oriented type person. I like to just sort of follow that thread a little bit. But I think, I want to do things in this life. Like I said, I want to travel more. I want to like expand my circle of motorcycle travels, get to Europe. Career-wise, I want to continue what I'm doing. And I want to work on records that really matter. When I was a kid, I thought music was going to change the world. Like the artists I was listening to were changing my world, and I want to be a part of that. Like I want that to manifest. I want some musician that I'm associated with to make a difference, like to the way people think and to how we treat each other. And then it's just to be a part of that solution.
All right, so people have now listened to our podcast. They've gotten to know you. They got to know your work, what you value, which has been amazing. How can people get a hold of you? How can people find you to get in contact, have you work on their stuff?
Busting out a new website. I was inspired by your new website, Jordan, so I decided to up that game. So I'm working on that. So website is specializedmastering.com. Facebook and Instagram. I usually, like for my Facebook is usually where I'm reading most of the stuff. You can friend me there. And I've also got a Facebook page, but they're kind of stingy with, the posts go out and they go nowhere with it if you don't pay for it. So,
yeah.
But I'm on Instagram too. I'll usually post there. I do have a Twitter, Masterist, but I don't really post that. I'm not a fan of that platform. My Instagram handle is specialized_mastering. You find me there, follow. And usually I post people in session with me, which is really fun to look back on those and just remember, okay, like this is who was in today. And always like to take a picture of whoever comes in.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And hopefully this website gets finished pretty soon. The beta is out, so have a look at that. Some pretty pictures of gear up there, and
yeah, it's beautiful gear.
I have to credit Sasha Muller did a lot of that photography. Some of it's mine, but Sasha really kind of taught me how to take pictures. So
all right.
I know he's going to be a guest at some point.
Yeah, that'll be fun. Thank you for coming out today.
My pleasure, Jordan. Thank you.
Yeah, and we'll have you back in the nearest future. And yeah, this has been Dana White on Music in the Northwest. Thanks again for tuning in. We'll catch you guys soon.